All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ramsey County Board Workshop. I am Commissioner Ramsey County Commissioner in charge of the Single District 1. Today's workshop topic is the investing in the housing continuum, planning and implementing local affordable housing aid. Just a reminder that this board workshop is recorded and it is live streamed on the Zoom webinar. There will be no votes taken during this workshop. We are going to start with introductions of the commissioners and presenters around the table and then go to the rest of the room. So Commissioner Tarja Singh from District 1.
Mary Jo, oh, sorry, I didn't know who she pointed to. Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner, District 2.
Rena Moran, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 4.
Lynn Becker, County Manager.
Keith Lattimore, Director of Housing Stability for Ramsey County.
Max Hildusen, Deputy Director of Housing Development.
Josh Olson, Interim Director for Community Economic Development.
Kelly Miller, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 7.
Jason McMurtry, County Commissioner, District 3.
Mike Chong, Commissioner for District 6.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Jason Hayden, Chief Clerk.
Laura Reyes, Deputy County Manager for the Safety and Justice Service Team. Kim Clemenson, Housing Stability. Clemens Farino, Administrative Planning Assistant.
Felicia Smith, Communications Associate for Housing Stability and Community and Economic Development.
Mary Jo Schmidt,
Eric Collins, Deputy County Manager, ETCI.
Maurice Rogers, staff. Kim Hassett,
Matt Hill with Commissioner McMurtry's office.
I'm Megan Burchett with Community Economic Development.
Excellent. All righty. And just to remind folks in the room, we had a bit of a late start for this workshop. So although it's about 10 to 2 right now, we are still finishing off at 3. In 2023, the state legislature passed and the governor signed a metro-wide sales tax specifically for affordable housing. The tax, called Local Affordable Housing Aid, or LAHA, was collected for the first time during a 5-month period in 2024 and brought in over $6 million. The Ramsey County Board then allocated those funds to 2 key areas along the housing continuum. One is eviction prevention and the second is stabilization of supportive housing. Today's board workshop will explore county investments along the housing continuum, and the county board will hear recommendations on the use of 2025-2026 LAHA. The 2 presenting departments are Housing Stability and Community and Economic Development. Housing Stability focuses on our service response to residents experiencing homelessness, and CED focuses on our permanent affordable housing supply. Thank you for being here today, and I'll pass this on to DCM. Or no, Josh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm not Carrie Collins, but sometimes I play her on TV. I'll play her. No, I was going to make some joke about being her understudy, but that's not true either. So good afternoon. We're gonna, as Commissioner, the Chair kind of spelled out a little bit of what we intend to do for today. There we go. We're going to kick this off, but before I turn it over to both Max and Keith to really dig into the slides, I wanted to kind of just start by saying, the goals of today's workshop are really to kind of revisit and review the housing continuum. We'll have a slide here in the subsequent slides. It's a slide that you should be familiar with. We showed it to you in many instances, really kind of showing that differentiation between where Housing Stability Department and where CED focus their areas, but where we really start to intersect along the housing continuum. We're going to review those LAHA aid amounts as well as our annual calendar and eligible uses. This is our 3rd time in front of you talking about LAHA, so recognizing that, you may have some knowledge and you may have some remember, but I know we've had a few new faces since our last presentations. We will also have some updated information as we kind of talk about our recommendations for 2025 and 2026. And then given where we are in this world, at least provide you with hopefully an ounce of confidence as we kind of are looking at how we provide some contingency planning and build in some kind of alternative approaches with the federal funding uncertainty that we at times feel like is coming, at times we hope doesn't come, but nevertheless, we want to kind of build that in. That does not come in at the front face, and we'll talk about that here on 25, 26, because we've been with you the last couple times in these workshops, kind of spelling out where we are beginning to invest these dollars and where. Just wanted to call that out is something that hangs over us that we don't yet know, but yet we're working through and working through some contingency planning. Here's that slide that I mentioned ever so briefly as where we intersect. Where you'll kind of see variations of this slide throughout the deck as we talk about the funding tools and the sources of money and the programs that sit kind of underneath this. But wanted to kind of lay that out always at the beginning of these presentations. So, next.
Like to start off by going over where along the continuum in 2024 did we invest our funding? All along the continuum, the work is done by partnerships and collaborations with nonprofits, government agencies, and private partners. And so this is just where county funds or pass-through funds from the county are invested along this that are directly in CED or housing stability. Of course, I think prevention is an area that we could consider really broadly, and it also include financial assistance services or social services and a lot of other supportive programs there as well. But just the funding that comes through the county through CED and housing stability along this continuum. Along the 6 categories, the largest categories happen on the middle to the right side of the continuum. So really supportive housing, subsidized rental, and shelters have a big investment. And then unsheltered has our probably smallest investment, followed by wealth generation. Prevention also has large investment dollars as well that Director Lattimore will touch on in a bit.
Before we exit this slide, I just wanted to call out the last slide in your deck is an acronym key for all these acronyms that are on the table. I know it's a lot, but they are a mouthful to kind of talk through, as well as to try to fit onto a slide. And in some cases, their official name is not even the name that's kind of used anymore. It is that acronym. So just wanted to call that out as we did provide that, we just didn't have enough space to put it on the slide.
Yeah, thank you. So LAHA is an opportunity to fill gaps along this housing continuum, and we can strengthen programs that we see fit and where we see the largest gaps in this continuum. So knowing that as we look ahead into 2025 and look back at 2024, let's quickly redefine LAHA and go over its eligible uses at the state level. So LAHA is a 1/4-cent sales tax collected across the 7-county metro area, and it is for affordable housing and other housing services, and it is collected by the State Department of Revenue. And then, so this tax was started in October 1st, 2023, and we received our first payment from the Department of Revenue in July 2024. So it was 5 months of tax collection in our first round. Aid amounts are based off of the percentage of rent-burdened households in the metro area. And so it is, Ramsey County has more cost-burdened households than some other counties. So it's based off of your population and your percentage of cost-burdened rental households. So for 2024, Ramsey County received just over $6 million in aid. And if we project that out, so that's 5 months of tax collection. If we project out that 5 months of tax collection from 2024, we could assume approximately $14 million for the 2025 aid amounts. Again, we will not learn those aid amounts until June of this year. So the state statute allows LAHA to be used for the financing of supply of affordable housing. You'll see these AMI levels go up to 80% and 115% AMI. Ramsey County invests at and focuses on a much lower AMI level, but the state statute allows for those higher AMI levels. State statute also allows for the financial support of nonprofit housing providers, rental assistance up to 80% of area median income, as well as shelter capital and operations. We'll need to begin reporting to Minnesota Housing as they are in charge of compliance in the state statute. We'll start that in 2025. And each year of funds has to be spent within 4 years of receipt. So we have a little bit of time every year to really spend down the funds. And so we know that Ramsey County and our housing continuum is really targeting, has targeted those lower AMI levels, so 30% AMI and stabilization as well. Moving to where we, in 2024, allocated LAHA funds. So on August 7th, 2024, CED and Housing Stability presented at a board workshop and confirmed that the following uses of LAHA would be $1 million for eviction prevention strategies and $5 million for the stabilization of existing supportive housing buildings. I just want to define supportive housing here as well. And so those are units that are required to have supportive services provided by a service provider attached to that unit. And they're usually for a very specific population. Often it is someone who's coming out of homelessness and has a disability or including mental health or addiction or a physical disability.
Real quick question. So with Kimball Court, would that qualify for under this?
So Kimball Court is supportive housing. It's 76 units of supportive housing. Yes. So everyone in that building is selected off of coordinated entry on the priority list and have a documented disability.
Where's Kimball Court?
Oh, right off of Snelling. Yeah, right next to the abandoned CVS.
Snelling and University.
Up there. Noted? Thanks.
Then on October 15th, the county board approved those uses, accepting the 2024 LAHA amount from the state and authorizing the county manager to accept future allocations of LAHA. And then established project codes in community and academic development and housing stability for those uses.
Next, so for the supportive housing, we're really the referral source. Is that right?
So yes,
We are the referral source. Somebody doesn't come off the street and gets a unit.
so so supportive housing is usually selected off the coordinated entry priority list, and a team within housing stability keeps that list, and most of those folks are either coming from shelter or unsheltered homelessness.
But that's what I.
Yeah.
You can't come off the street. If the building is all 100%, then you gotta be referred.
Yes. So again, this year's annual calendar for LAHA will be 8 amounts will be announced in June 2025. Funding will arrive in 2 parts. So we'll get our first batch of funding in July 2025, and the second half will arrive in December 2025. We'll know the amounts of both of those in June. And then, like the typical process with CED, departments will bring specific awards for specific activities to the county board and describe those uses for you to consider as recommendations.
Is that through like an application process then for organizations that are providing those types of services like Kimball Court and other service providers?
So with the 2020, and we'll
Or do you already have organizations you're working with and just being?
I'm going to touch on the 2024
okay.
LAHA amounts and the support and
Okay.
stabilized solicitation at a later slide. Thank you. And so with that, I'm going to hand it to Director Lattimore to talk about housing stability's recommendations for 2025 and 2026.
Yep, thank you. And as we look at the first slide, one of the things we wanted to share is that we wanted to put ideas into various categories where there are mainstream strategies that are carried out, as well as some that are primary strategies. And those are like locally as it relates to Ramsey County.
Mhm.
And then there's some population specific. And not just housing stability, we work within our continuum of care, which is federally mandated. And we have roughly about 64 partners that partner with us to carry out those different priorities in those different sectors. But I wanted to give you a sense of how those trenches of dollars are calculated, and are they more federal, are they locally, and where do we come in? And, you know, obviously some of the things that we looked at are population specific. We do get folks that are not Ramsey County at times, but we try to prioritize those individuals, you know, as we move those services through our continuum. I wanted to also highlight a couple things here that the reason why we are here and to talk about our Family Homelessness Prevention and Assistance Program, better known as FHPAP, one of those acronyms that we probably have on the back that back sheet. I wanted to just give you a picture, a sense of kind of where we are and how these dollars that we're, you know, looking to collect through 2025 and things that we're considering as we want to say, this is kind of where we believe those needs are. As we look at this particular sheet, when we looked at our funding, so that first bullet there, you'll notice that our current local funding is $11.1 million. That's going to be dropping back to base, and that base is $3 million. When you look at the $11.1 million to give you a sense of kind of urgency of this area, the $11.1 million, we are able to fund roughly about 10% of their request with that dollar. And so we're going to be really stretched when we drop back to $3 million, because those same number of folks that are going to be asking for dollars are going to stay the same, if not increase. And so these are things that we're starting to look at to say, how do we make best uses of the dollars that we're coming in, at least for the portion of housing stability is set to, you know, participate in. Some of the eligibility things that, you know, we look at the, like our federal poverty guidelines, you got to be at or below 200%, federal poverty guidelines. Some assistance, you know, can be used for rents, deposits, utilities assistance. And obviously some of the project types that we see here in prevention is obviously that first bullet. I also want,
I'm sorry, just a point of question, the drop, is that just because the drop in our, the loss of the ARPA dollars, or is there another reason for that drop?
those are some of the dollars that we got with ARPA, and then we're going back to base throughout the state. To put it broadly, I think that if we look at the state as a whole, there's roughly about, there's an estimated need that we know of to be a dollar amount to cover all of it for the whole state, and that's $350 million. We're dropping back to $20 million for the whole state. Our portion is roughly about just that $3 million that we're going to receive. So there's a significant concern, obviously, from the position of housing stability and how we are best suited to try to make some arrangements on what do we do in the meantime. So this is a real concern for us. And so that's why we're looking at how do we get some of these prevention dollars in there through some of our LAHA dollars to try to say, how do we do some work there to make sure that we cover this gap that we're existing.
And, okay,
Go, just, well, so why did the state go down to 20 million?
yeah, is that
Yeah.
state dollars, is that federal dollars?
Yeah,
What
why?
caused us to go back to base? What is that?
Right, so we, Madam Chair, we had some additional dollars in this through ARPA and some of the other dollars that we were able to receive. Some of the things that happened last year legislatively, all of those were dollars that we had, and there was that one-time funding that we were able to utilize. Now, when we go back to base, meaning that those dollars are no longer available, that base is going to go back to where we were before those dollars were able to enhance the amount that we had. And so this is where we are, and that's what we're facing now, unless something changed between now and then. So we're just preparing for this because that's what we know now. And, you know, like I said, to paint that picture broadly, so you understand the magnitude of where FHPAP is funded and where we're going to go back to base. It is roughly what's needed to cover all. Remember, we're only covering 10% of the requests with 11.1 million. To cover all throughout the state, we would need 350 million to cover everything. But understanding that 350 million is going to go back to 20, and the 20 is for the entire state. So I think that's why we're looking to say, how do we best utilize the sales tax dollars to try to be prepared to at least do some sort of, you know, partnership with, you know, our partners here to see how do we best prepare for this.
Thank you for that clarification.
No problem. If we look at like the bubble over here, we say since October of 2023, 20,000 residents sought assistance to FHPAP. The average balance owed is roughly about $3,600 per person. So these are things that we're trying to figure out best utilization of how do we get more bang for the buck and how do we best prepare ourselves to be able to, because obviously we are not satisfying everyone who needs the help, but we are trying to prioritize where we can best utilize those dollars to support what we can. In our proposed use of funds, current funding scenarios, we are looking, and this will be a request at next week's board meeting. We'll learn more about a strategic acquisition, assistance for shelter space from those $24-25 that we currently have. And you'll see that in next year's, or next week's board action request. And then, of course, the eviction prevention that we look at for this year, understanding how FHPAP is going to be severely not funded and underfunded.
How does the Catholic Charities last week, I mean, they're serving residents, which is for very low income individuals up in Cathedral Hill. I understand there are other nonprofits selling their housing, affordable housing units. How is that gonna impact this big picture?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Ortega, those are going, I can't really speak broadly on how the impact is, but I know that anything helps. So that's one less person. If they're gonna sell places that they can't use or utilize, it just compiles the situation more. And I think you'll learn more about next week on some things that we believe are going to be. This is why we're bringing this proposal next week, this RBA, to the board, because we're anticipating that there's some other ways that we can get more bang for the buck because of those things that we're seeing with partners and their abilities to utilize spaces. Part of this also gets into, as we look at zoning and where some of those things can be operated from, that also plays into a picture of kind of how we're able to move from various places around the city. Right now, we're only able to do many of the shelter work and other things in downtown St. Paul. And obviously that poses its own issues with some of the spaces that we have here. So there's strategic ways that we're thinking that we're able to maybe get some better utilization of dollars to account for more ability to help a broader scope of folks.
Thank you.
Chair. So with all this information, what I'm getting is that because of state funding that's going to be drastically cut back, we are going to consider using LAHA funds to help support with the acquisition of shelter space.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Zhang, yes, we're going to be bringing that RBA to the board, and you'll learn more about why in this board meeting as to why that's going to come to this board for those actions, because we believe that when we look at what we have versus what we need, there are some changes I believe that's going to allow us to do and better serve the public. And I think you'll be pleased with the RBA that's coming.
Commissioner Burkett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as clarification, as someone who's new to all of this, how many shelters does the county own or operate?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McMultry, right now, we run the Family Service Center. We own that particular building and we subcontract that out to Catholic Charities to run for us. Other than that, we support some of the other charities that or nonprofits to run those shelters, and we support them through some of our levy dollars. And those are places like Safe Space, Interfaith Action, Union Gospel Mission, and other folks that we partner with through the COC. When we look at those 64 partners that we talked about in the earlier slide, those are individuals that much of the dollars that we get come through housing stability, and those are federal dollars through our COC. The COC then prioritize who gets those dollars based on the needs of the whole COC continuum. And those dollars are funded by pass-through dollars through housing stability through the federal government to those agencies for support. So some of those are funded by grants and others are funded by levy dollars that we have here through Ramsey County. But as far as the ones that we actually run or own, we own that building out in Maplewood, and that is for families right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So moving into the Community and Economic Development 2025-2026 recommended use of funds, the LAHA funds. Here we can talk more about the Support and Stabilize solicitation that occurred. Support and Stabilize was the solicitation that responded to the need that we heard in the community, that nonprofit and private developers who own and operate affordable housing were really struggling with increased costs and decreased revenue due to higher vacancy rates and increased operational costs like utilities, insurance, security costs, things like that. So this solicitation opened in January 2025 with $2024, and responses were due in February of 2025. We are in the midst of finalizing our review and bringing this to board for next week on March 18th. This was a competitive solicitation, and some of the eligibility requirements were that the building had to have been in operation since at least January 1st, 2020. That they had an occupancy rate less than 93%, so that showed that they were struggling with some of that occupancy and vacancy. And they had to have at least 5 units that were supportive housing. And one of the reasons for that kind of supportive housing requirement was that those units are less likely to generate revenue needed to operate a building because you're serving the communities most in need. So those were our eligibility requirements for Support and Stabilize. And we'll bring recommendations to the board on March 18th for those awards. With that, we always provide a project narratives description. So you'll see descriptions of all the projects and their requests. So our recommendation for 2025 is to use additional LAHA funds to support the applications that we already received. So we received 18 applications with a total request of $14.5 million, kind of showing the need in that space. And as we spoke about earlier, only $5 million were available in 2024 for this use. So one would be kind of let's be efficient and bring recommendations of existing applications from this calendar year with additional 2025 funds when those funds become available. And then the second is we're starting to see really the need for capital for deferred maintenance and affordable rental housing as well. And so that's a little bit broader of a scope than just Support and Stabilize. And it starts to bring in these buildings that do not have supportive housing and maybe just have a boiler from 1980 that they have not been able to replace that's causing really high utility costs in their building. And so kind of targeting some of those rehab and repairs within those buildings that would make the most sense and help bring down operating costs as well. So those are CED's proposals for local affordable housing aid in 2025, 2026, when we think about the current housing continuum and the investments made across that.
Do you have any questions at this point?
Yeah, I just want to, if we define supportive housing, is that 30% of AMI, 60, 80? Was it all of that?
Yeah. Commissioner, usually supportive housing is at the 30 or 50% AMI level, but it is, there are requirements that that unit has a specific service provider that works with that unit. And most of those service providers are coordinated through the Housing Stability Department. And often and generally, the person who is referred to live in that unit must come from the coordinated entry priority list, which is coordinated through Housing Stability Department.
And just one addition, and Commissioner, in addition to that, those service providers actually work with FAS, our financial assistance services, to make sure that they're getting the funds in order to support and pay for those services. So I just wanted to make sure that there's an understanding that there are various departments that work with that process. And, you know, so housing stability vets those individuals who are the providers, and they then connect them through the list of the coordinated entry system. Those providers then work with our financial assistance service team in order to get those funds that are available to pay and support those individuals who are housed. So I just wanted to clear that last piece up.
There's like a huge coordinated effort that's happening.
Commissioner Ortega?
Just a follow-up. So the financial assistance is for the supportive services. not for rental assistance or any of that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega, they do have some, there are different programs that they have. They do have some rental assistance in FAS, but specifically when we're talking about the housing support piece, that's what I wanted to make sure that was understood, that housing stability works with the providers to vet them through, and we haven't done that for a while. We actually looking to bring a solicitation, the end of this quarter, first part of next quarter. We're still in that. And then those individuals who are selected to be housing support providers will then be connected to the coordinated entry list, which is obviously something that's within housing stability. And then they take the funds from the funds that are available through financial assistance services.
So if I'm let me try to understand this, because it is confusing even for me. So if I'm a landlord of affordable housing building, I would apply to you to have, let's say, 5 units supporting housing in my building. Is that correct?
The landlords will work with the providers to say that they have space available. The providers would then work with the landlord to say that these 5 units, we find folks to fill
And the
in.
provider being,
Those who come through, like hypothetically right now, if there's agencies out there that want to be a housing support provider, we do a solicitation to find who those providers are. When they apply to become a housing support provider and vet the system and is selected, then that agency can work with different providers to find space. And then that space will then be filled from the coordinated entry list in your building.
so as a private landlord, who would I have to hook up with to provide that housing?
The housing support providers, but we could also act as a referral too. So if we get the landlord calling us, we can then let the providers know that there's a landlord that's willing to offer up space.
Gotcha.
So we'll do whatever we can to connect those services, but typically that's how it works.
And Keith, on the other side of that, could you explain a hypothetical resident who may be referred to such a service, you know, what they might look like, what kind of services they might be getting, just to kind of put a face to what we're talking about?
Sure. So let's say someone hypothetically has some mental health issues and needs some supports in order to be able to live independently. They could be connected through our coordinated entry system and be qualified for housing support. And from that, they will be selected, partner up with one of the housing support providers who either specializes in various people. You know, there's different housing supports, but maybe one that specializes in working with folks with mental health disabilities, to where they would act as their housing support provider. And then they would be working with them to place them in an adequate location, and then act as their liaison, so to speak, between the landlord, them, and the county to make sure that they are using the dollars to pay their rent to help them live independently.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, Director Lattimore, is that the same as what you had shared about like a RFP about releasing an RFP for housing support providers?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner John, that is exactly what it is. So that's going to be coming up here probably in the next, we'll work with our operations manager now to kind of get the dates of when we want to offer that up. And we'll make that known to the different providers that are in St. Paul or Ramsey County or around the state for that matter, who want to become housing support providers with Ramsey County. That's the process that they will follow, and then it will be vetted to see who actually is selected for that process.
Is there, what is the responsibility of the county, I guess? Because it's, we have the housing support providers, supportive services providers, and also the county too. So then what is our role in this? Do we have to match them up? Like between the services and the housing for the resident?
So, Commissioner John, so our role is really to vet, to make sure that they are following and being responsible to the clients. We also have a responsibility to make sure that we screen those individuals and manage those individuals accordingly. Our planners do that role in housing stability. And then we also work with them because we have a coordinated list of individuals who need housing support to make sure that they are monitoring. So sort of like a caseload with those individuals. And then if there's issues along the way, we interject there. Hypothetically, if a person's not doing what they would be, needing to do, then we could, pool their abilities to be housing support providers. So we have a responsibility to make sure that the service delivery is adequate to the standard. And that's what we would be doing in housing stability for those clients.
Thank you.
Director Latimer, I'm just curious, do we have a sense of, earlier in one of our workshops, we talked about the demand for some of these housing specifics and then our supply. Do we have a sense of what the current demand would be for supportive housing, kind of what we're talking about versus our current supply?
Madam Chair, yeah, there's a demand there. I mean, there's no doubt. And that can be from various reasons of places that, capacity, some places are full, some of the occupancies are there. We believe we can make strides and maybe opening up more, but it's going to take some investment specifically around case management, because I believe what we've seen after COVID, we've seen a lot of landlords in a situation to where when they were not able to evict clients because of they were not getting the pay. We've seen landlords thereafter want to shift to more government kind of help aid so they have something going as opposed to having all clients who were self-paid. And so, but they are afraid to be able to sometimes open up opportunity because they feel like what happens if things go bad? And that's where we still have work to do to whenever there's opportunity, advocate for case management and some of those, to do some outreach and just come alongside them so we can build that confidence in there. But yeah, we do have a need, obviously, with space being available. And that's why it's important for us when we talk about CED, investing to keep those units online, specifically those who might be at risk of maybe going offline because of repairs and other things that are needed. That's why it's important for us to not so much, I mean, it's tough for us not to focus on both at the same time, but we really have to have some teeth to put to buy time to get those investments, to keep those units online, or we suffer what we've seen in like the Lowry building right across the street and other places. That is critical for us to put infrastructure in order to keep those places viable, specifically those for, affordable housing. And so that's where we are seeing some of the push and pull, so to speak, of available units, landlords wanting to, be able to fill those units with individuals that are in need that we work with. And so that continues to be something that we have to work towards.
I appreciate that. And I think the idea of keeping that real world context and the urgency of the work that you're doing, and that just the gap between what would provide residents with what they need versus where we are will allow us in this body to make steps to build towards maybe closer to that. So I think, setting your work within the context is tremendously helpful for us to keep that urgency in front of mind. Thank you.
So, I just to kind of pull that thread just for a moment, what the chair said, there's a stated housing need across the continuum. We know that across all, frankly, across all areas of housing. But, certainly the economic competitiveness and inclusion plan called out the deep need. It's kind of like, not that there's the hole is wider, but the hole is deeper in terms of the deficit that we have in deeply affordable units. And we've used that $15,000 number in previous presentations. And certainly we brought forth in the ARPA presentations kind of where our two departments are kind of really diving in and helping to support that. And Director Lattimore, called it out, I thought perfectly, and just saying where we've been trying to be intentional in multiple places at the same time. But as you know, and I think this is the theme that I'm trying to strike, is that while we have tried to build a lot of new infrastructure, new supply, we recognize that there still remains a leak in the bucket, right? That there still remains units that are falling through, if we want to think about it in the supply side, in the infrastructure side, but also that individuals are usually attached to these units in terms of a safe place, a place to grow, and a place, safe place to build wealth. And so why I mentioned that is, as Max was kind of outlining a little bit is where we kind of made a little bit of a shift last year in 2024, which was to kind of look backwards because we had heard from community, including many of the housing providers who would normally show up on our housing supply, expanding the supply are saying, we're having a really difficult time trying to, maintain the units that we already have in our portfolio, let alone trying to build. And we're certainly not out of the weeds of that. And I think Max outlined that very clearly, and you'll see that in the recommendations coming to you in the next couple of weeks, that we have a greater need than what is probably available to us right now. But, through some intentional efforts, we're going to continue to do that. It's been said, the best laid plans, right, can sometimes go awry. And so I just want to pause here to say that while we are really starting to build what we think is a pretty solid plan of attack, and trying to kind of, hit this from multiple angles and support the housing continuum from certain places, there is this other thing that hangs out there. And while I don't want us, my goal today is to not take us down that pathway of imaginary horribles yet. But what I want to say is where federal funding falls in these areas of the continuum. And in some places, I think we can absorb, or we can find creative approaches and ways to fill that, what would be lost through some federal funding, make up for it in other sources. We've been successful, this board, thank you, for investing through the HRA levy, through the housing sales tax that we've been coming here to talk about, are ways that we can kind of build stronger locally driven infrastructure and not be so reliant on federal programs. That said, this is our reality, and we don't know yet what will, trims will come or cuts may come from different things. What we know a little bit, and I'll just say out loud, is that traditionally when there is a change in governance at the White House and in Congress, we expect to see some shifts from priorities. And we've seen that before with home and CDBG, speaking specifically on the CD world. We've seen that. I've been here long enough. I remember having an intern doing a scan of our projects over time, and you can see these peaks and valleys of what we receive from the federal government. So that's not surprising, but I think what's surprising or maybe surprising to us is how we do that. But on this subsequent slide is where our two departments have been discussing how we might be looking at LAHA as a way to kind of, we'll say, soften, situations. Again, I don't want to take us down imaginary horribles where everything is cut or only a little bit, but I think the point is where we think some of these things could.
Commissioner McMurtry and Commissioner Shaw.
Quick question on the previous slide. Is there, and I really appreciate this, like really getting a sense of all the different funding buckets that goes into the different areas. Is there a way for us to see percentage wise for each of them of like how much of 2024 LAHA is going towards prevention, just so we can get a clear understanding of how large of those amounts each of those buckets are playing into each area?
Just a clarification, Commissioner, do you mean what percentage of like LAHA is in within each of these buckets, or within each bucket, how much the percentage of each individual funding stream is funding that particular goal? The second, okay. Thank you. Commissioner Shaw?
Similarly, I have a question about like, what is our, just for the record, our CDBG allocation as well as our home allocation, like how much are we impacted right now?
Commissioner, our annual entitlement amount of CDBG is about $1.2 million. And then in addition to that, we get program income in from old loans. So our amount that we're able to solicit out into the community is usually larger than that $1.2 million. And is closer to last year, I think was about $1.7 million. Home funds are just over $500,000 annually as an entitlement grant. And then with program income coming in from old loans, that amount's usually closer to $1 million.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, one thing I just want to be clear though, Ramsey County receives a CDBG and home allocation for suburban Ramsey County.
Mhm.
So, city of St. Paul receives a separate allocation. So if we were to do a little bit of this work, and I agree, I think we could probably start to piece this together and kind of show this graphically. We would need to bring in other data points, including, some sources that go to our partners, who are very influential in our work. But certainly in the home and CDBG, those numbers that Max referenced are specific to our allocations for suburban Ramsey County only.
Commissioner McGuire?
Oh, thanks. So we're hearing, about, clawbacks and, freezes at the federal level and maybe at the state level, although the state is not gonna have as much opportunity to do that in the election today, we hope. Do we think LAHA is an area that they're looking at? Are they gonna keep that? Are they we haven't really talked about it. Maybe Rena knows, or do we know what might, yeah. They have the ability to claw that back, or, to discontinue that ability to tax. Right.
What I was going to suggest, when you mentioned the work that came really under the leadership of Representative Howard, is that we need to be advocating and thanking him for those dollars, and couldn't also, I use the word plead, to stay strong and maintain those dollars coming to counties, because it is really, really needed. It's gonna be a shared legislature, but we don't want them to claw back and take that money back, right? And so it has really supported us here in Ramsey County.
Remove that ability for us to.
But really, we
collect
need
that
to be
tax.
thanking them and letting them
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
him and the Senate, right?
So do we have a group that's doing that? Is there a housing group that's kind of putting that together to say, hey, let's keep that one, and we're really using it, it's really helpful? And do we have rural support for that as well? It's
the
just
metro.
7 county, right? Yeah, just 7 county. But hopefully the 7 counties are aligned on this.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I mean, yes, I mean, there's a local LAHA connected
Yeah.
group, and we communicate back and forth. Certainly, we certainly are still sitting on this side advocating for greater clarification of just the rules of the existing one. So we certainly don't want to spend too much time and energy wanting to work on the clarification at the same time somebody, or a group may be trying to claw it back, right? I think this is good, important funding that is needed towards the housing continuum. So yes, there is definitely that. I think there was and has been bills introduced that would, I don't know if it's a clawback or just, end the sales tax.
Right, and it's a ending of.
Which,
the ability.
we think. Obviously, we think that that's not what we're looking for, because we're still remaining in a housing crisis. And we still need it. Certainly the legislature, between the first time they approved the bill and then there was a subsequent year where they clarified it and added some additional eligible uses. We think, all that is good. We can still work with it.
And you get the sense that the others. Well, we know Hennepin and Ramsey are the other 5 counties. They're using it. They think it's good. They're just that they'll be supportive of keeping this. We'll have allies.
Nobody wants to give it back.
Yeah.
in the
okay.
metro area.
That's what I just didn't know. I haven't heard, right, yeah.
And Commissioner, we're using it in very different
Yeah,
ways.
okay.
I think, to just kind of spell out, I mean, I think some of the uses that we've called out are very comparatively to what Hennepin County is doing. That being said, I mean, Dakota County, Washington County, and I think Scott, can't remember exactly if it's Scott, but at least 2 of those counties are looking to use some of this LAHA on shelter acquisition and expansion, which is the first time that they, in my time, they've invested in that space. So they're recognizing, on this continuum too, that they have to be supportive in different ways as well. Ours run across the entire continuum, and now they're seeing it too.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
So in a reduced federal funding scenario, we would continue with points 1 through 4 that we mentioned as our kind of current state scenario, but we would also need to consider 2 areas that our current housing continuum could not absorb. And that'd be owner occupied rehab and repair programs. In CED, we have 3 CDBG funded programs. Actually, now it's 2. Critical repair program that repairs manufactured homes and single family homes in suburban Ramsey County. and a rehab loan program for larger repairs within the single family home portfolio for low to moderate income residents. So that would be one area that, in a reduced federal funding scenario, could be at risk, and we'd have to think about funding with LAHA as well.
But that's only for the suburbs.
Yes, the city of St. Paul also runs those programs through their CDBG funds as well.
The exact same program?
Basically, yes. They have an emergency repair program and a rehab loan program as well.
So what you're saying is that if our CDBG funds went down for this program, St. Paul's likely would as well. So even though that's theirs to control, they would also be feeling this loss. County manager.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I know Commissioner Young joined our Chief of Staff, Maria Sarabia, with the East Side Funders, and they were having a conversation about philanthropy as it relates to some of the federal challenges. And I think the good work that this team has done really helps us kind of delineate maybe like where we are seeing unique gaps. And I think there's a lot of appetite in the philanthropy community to better understand kind of where those are and to talk more with us. And so that was always on our plan, was to consider, you know, not only our government relations work, but what is our kind of philanthropic partnership work look like? And I think I was gonna wait till after the legislative session to kind of get that moving a little bit more, but I think we're accelerating some of those conversations. I had a meeting with Dr. Jolly with the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. He's on the cusp of retiring. So we're trying to figure out, you know, who are the key partners in the community that are putting money into our community, and how do they augment and understand what our unique challenges are to come alongside. So we're not like just, you know, funding haphazardly, I guess, when they could actually be creating some stopgaps into some areas. And this is a really clear, you know, exercise of what other departments need to be doing too, is just say, we're understanding our funding streams, we know what the risk areas are, and here's where a couple areas where we're vulnerable, because they'll be interested in understanding those issues a little bit more. So thank you for doing that, and I look forward to kind of bringing, you know, 5 and 6 to those conversations, and I would urge more departments to be looking at doing this kind of gap analysis, you know, around their federal funds. So there's a lot of interest in philanthropy to talk to governments about this locally. So, yeah.
Just for clarity, so counties get the LAHA dollars and the city gets CDBG dollars? Or they get, do they get LAHA dollars?
Yes.
They both get both.
They both get both.
They both get both, but they got two different pots of
Yeah.
direct appropriations into.
Commissioner, I will say that the county's LAHA proportion is much larger than the city's proportion, and the way the state statute was
Oh,
written
interesting.
to provide a larger percentage directly to the counties, rather than have a more decentralized approach with cities. But all cities also get LAHA as well. It's just a smaller amount. All cities within the 7-county.
All
metro area.
cities, isn't that 19 cities, so.
And I'm gonna clarify that even further. It's all cities over a certain population.
Okay,
So Lauderdale, for example, does not receive local affordable housing aid, but Mounds View does, because
Okay.
they reach that
the
population.
population, that population.
Well, we'll be getting calls from Lauderdale.
Commissioner McMurtry and then Commissioner Miller.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So this money is also in addition to the HRA levy. Gotcha, okay. And from my understanding, for the HRA levy, it is split 50% to St. Paul, 50% to suburban county. Okay.
Okay, this is maybe really silly. They all use the same formula as well then, so essentially a house is, or however that's calculated, is being counted twice for the city and the county?
Interesting. Commissioner, the state statute says that 25% of LAHA funds and the sales tax goes to the state of Minnesota for Minnesota housing. 25 goes to the city, and then 50% of the sales tax goes to the county.
Okay, so essentially, yes.
So yes,
Yeah.
the formula says those houses are counted for the city of Mounds View, for example,
And
and
the
as a
county.
total for the county as well.
Okay.
Or that I need it.
Quick question, because I believe that you mentioned in one of the previous that previously we were getting, I think, with the percentage of cost burden households in the county, we were getting like $6 million last year, and you're projecting 14 million for this year. So does that mean we have seen a considerable increase in the amount of cost burden households in the district, or why? I guess just trying to understand that jump from the 6 to the 14.
Yeah, Commissioner, the 2024 amount was only based off of a 5-month tax collection period, so we're projecting if we extrapolated out that 5 months across 12 months, we'd expect about $14 million.
Okay.
So if we move on to next steps, again, recommended awards from the support and stabilize solicitation, which is the use of 2024 LAHA funds, will be presented at the county board on March 18th, so next week. And then I'll hand it to Keith for the next bullet point.
And that was just, I previously mentioned that, next week we'll see an RBA come in, but we're gonna continue to have those conversations on housing stability investments. Basically for the winter and spring 2025 dollars that are coming in. So we'll continue to be looking at and taking that into consideration for what we've laid out today about where we know that those cliffs are coming. So.
And then further down the list, the 2025 LAHA dollars will be put into the housing development solicitation, which is a competitive solicitation, and we expect that solicitation to be released in late April or early May of this spring. And then we'll learn the 2025 LAHA aid amounts as we're reviewing those applications, so that we'll learn those aid amounts in June 2025. And then we would bring recommended awards for the second round of support and stabilize in June 2025. And then housing development solicitation awards would be July 2025. So they'll all kind of unfold with 2025 LAHA over the spring and summer.
I just wanted to jump on that just for a quick second to pair it with something Commissioner Becker or County Manager Becker had said, which is looking at our philanthropic partners, but also realizing that the tremendous network of our provider partners and our landlord partners and all the different people who will be, soliciting at these, for these different grants, right? Not all of them will get them or be fully funded, but I'm wondering, on top of, reviewing them and building those relationships for this specific or ongoing granting periods, is there an opportunity for us to be using that information that they put into those documents as a way of directing our philanthropic partners directly to them, or for a greater understanding of how, outside of these particular funds, how we can be a more effective and supportive partner in other ways that we're working with them? I mean, we're gonna have to really be creative in how we collectively as an ecosystem are holding our residents up, and there's more than just shifting dollars that will help with that. And I hate to, if we're gonna have to be doing all of this, what can we be doing beyond these dollars to help support providers who are helping us help our residents?
I mean, Madam Chair, I think there's a couple of things there. I think, go backwards there on your last point. I think there's a lot of opportunity to see the solicitations and pull out kind of whatever you guys can and can't fund, some of the key themes that, like, what is the state of kind of this housing ecosystem in Ramsey County, and be able to share that with partners, and maybe that's an extra question or something that's fairly simple. I do think creating more flexibility around our procurement processes. I know when I was, workforce director, we tried to make the solicitations so that we could get other dollars, even share them with other funders. That's an interesting conversation to talk to, like, the procurement team, to see if there's some flexibility, so it's not tucked so tight that it's like you're doing a solicitation just for this funding stream for us only. Maybe there's a little broader lens you could consider. I don't know how that would all lay out, but it's a lot of work to fill out a solicitation, certainly. And so I know you guys did that with I guess going back, maybe that was CARES funding, but I think, like, being able to fund some of them and then sharing some of those solicitations with the city of St. Paul, and then they could fund some of them. I mean, that was pretty creative, so continuing to do those kind of things. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for this, and I was so busy squaring out in red, my other list, the other list that we had, that I forgot to. What is this red? What are the red squares? Are they the ones that we didn't get federal funding?
They're federal.
That's federal.
Federal
I
sources.
just had forgot whether it was federal or state. Thank you for that. And just, thank you for all this. This is really, really helpful. What keeps you all three awake the most at night? I mean, I know all this does, and it's all scary because we're heading into such uncertainty with everything. But what's your biggest fear?
Commissioner, I think, from my seat, I think the biggest fear is that when we look at the cliffs around those who are in authority, I mean, like our legislative partners and folks who are making the decisions. My biggest fear is that they could lose sight of the little folks. And that they may make decisions that's not gonna land well for those who are doing the work. My biggest fear right now is that, as I tell my team, we have a number of partners and we've all seen it here. They've come to the county board for assistance who are not getting the funding that they needed. And as they either close programs or they reduce the capacity to run those programs, we lose them and we probably won't get them back. And that is my biggest fear, because I think that as we look at some of our, strategic, goals and things that, our staff have done something with COC, they're not even able to pay with some of the rising cost. Those who are doing the work is also facing housing instability because they're not able to pay a livable wage to the folks who's doing the work that we need them to do. And when they're not able to get the funding, and the county obviously can't levy everything to fund these nonprofit efforts, that's my biggest fear, that everything, it's a house of cards, that we lose those partners who have been around for decades, who have done this work, they're compassionate about the work, they're compassionate about the people. And if they go away, we're not gonna get them back. Because it's gonna take that much more just to even bring them back, and people will start looking at other places that are more stable than those who are working in the nonprofit industries, because they might not be getting the funding they need. That is my biggest fear, and that's what keeps me up at night.
And I want to hear from the other two too, but as you think about that, if you could even jot down even just a couple sentences on that, all of our policymakers that we visited in DC and actually at the state level, they want to hear these examples. They want to hear these stories. I mean, they want to say, they want to hear, here's the people that we're working with. They need money to do this work. We'll lose them if we don't. 1, 2, 3. I mean, these policymakers want, our friends want to hear this. I would say at both the state and federal level. I mean, I know they do, because that's what they asked us for. So just listing a couple of those that might lose it, or just this whole little, that new one, it's not a nuance. I mean, that reality is maybe sometimes low. So thank you.
Can I just add to that real quick? A short, with that type of story, but also have stories of that I got the service, right? And had it not been around, I would have been homeless, right?
Yeah.
So that also shows that, it has stabilized families and not just an individual, but sometimes a whole family, right? And I think those stories are powerful too.
And we'll
when we
share them
came
away.
from,
Yeah, we'll share them away. All right.
Commissioner Mill.
I just wanted to add to Keith, what you said, because it's really important, what you said, that not only do our nonprofit partners, but they also have the trust of the community and have been a part of the community for a really long time. So when they start pulling back on programming or reducing their services, it also loses distrust in the community as well. So that's sometimes worth more, is having that trust in those relationships.
Put that point down. Yeah. That's a great point.
Thank you. And as we are starting to come to a close of our time, just last minute thoughts and questions from around the table.
But can I get the?
Oh, yes,
their
I'm
two
sorry,
challenges? I told him I would get that, yeah.
What keeps you up at night, Director, Deputy Director?
And.
I know,
Max.
Max is frank, I'll let him say it.
So I'm probably the most pessimistic person at this table, but HUD and its rental assistance programs are connected to almost every affordable housing building in the entire county.
Oh, God.
Hundreds of thousands of units across the metro area. If many of those are directly in contracts between HUD and the apartment building itself, and if those contracts are not honored, then that apartment building will not have enough revenue to probably pay their mortgage, or if they don't have a mortgage anymore, their operating expenses. One tower, we know Skyline Tower off of 94 by Target, that is 1,000 residents in that tower. Every single resident is rental assistance with HUD. That's just one tower. Every single building we can think of has a relationship with HUD. So that's my biggest fear, but that has not been said out loud, right?
No.
Like that has,
Right.
this is, touches this whole ecosystem. and
We need to
it's something
quantify that a little bit.
If you
Yeah.
could get that in 3 bullet points, we will send that to our, you know, our congressional and state.
Just don't let Elon know that.
No,
Right.
but I mean,
That's so
but
true.
we can send it to Amy and Tina and Betty. They all want, and our state, but they all, I mean, those 3 for sure want to hear it. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Max is, I mean, why I used the word imaginary horribles earlier is we can go down a long
I
list of
know,
pathways and it's really hard. Because we've never felt this in the housing industry in particular before. You know, certainly I've been with this county for, you know, now over 15 years. And so I was tangential to the housing crisis in 2008, 2009 and 2010 as we kind of grappled with it. We didn't have resources back then. I'll just say we didn't, you know, we received some drops in the bucket to help support community in different ways. You know, I guess, you know, I think the thing that keeps me up the most is that this is an industry that for all of its maybe challenges is the area that needs the least amount of disruption. Not because we don't need to be looking for new opportunities to new partners and new ways of doing business and more efficiencies, whatever you want to use. It's just an area that hits the most vulnerable directly, as Max, pointed out, and Keith too, that, you know, we can't always see around the corner because of how deep the relationships that our federal organization or federal government has directly with residents, but also how this impacts the marketplace in so many different ways. You know, I was just going to touch on what you said earlier, Chair Jevin Singh, when you said, you know, partnerships. This is a particular part of the industry, like development, our world on the supply side, where partnerships are critical. And affordable housing is the most complicated development there is out there. Because it takes so many partnerships, it takes so many navigations through solicitations of partners and such, that it's hard to kind of work through the disruption that is potentially going to come on so many efforts. And it's one thing, it's a federal agency. The other is just how it spills over into just the marketplace and how individuals feel that and impact that directly. Because things are very woven, in particular here in the East Metro. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing where it's like we're trying to be positive and remain focused. I think like I said earlier, we're very thankful that we have locally driven tools in the way that we never did before. So that we should feel good about. But at the same time, it's going to be we have some difficult moments likely in front of us.
So just wrapping up, so thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. So we're just to review. LAHA is an opportunity to fill gaps along the housing continuum and alongside all of the other alphabet of acronyms of funding. Today we were able to review the housing continuum, current investments, the LAHA amounts and recommendations for the future, considering contingency plans, given the federal funding uncertainties. Given those funding cuts and anticipated needs, some suggestions were made for future investments. We'll be hearing more about those as a board, and I'm sure all of us from our conversation today, you know that we are going to dig deep into the packets of information that you send us and have lots of questions to help us path the way forward. And also, I'm very concerned because I don't think anyone on this table is getting enough sleep. Given that all of these things are keeping us up at night. But I think it's very important for us to stay clear-eyed and pragmatic so that we are ready to dig in and do the work because that's what's going to get us through. So thank you all so much. It's a good session.
Thank you. Good job. Send your stories to us and general.
Commissioner McGuire, you know, I think the one thing that
Oh, you did already? Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't know if you did.